Yeah, I think first, yeah, we will have an introduction of the Banona so the student can know more about you or your uh, what year are you right now, and also like what school are you going to, and also yeah, maybe yeah the scholar year and so yeah. Um, oh, Vaishnavi, can you start first?
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone. My name is Vaishnavi. I am really happy to be here because GSC like helped me a lot when I was going through the whole process from like MCAT to like essay writing to choosing. I was a 2020 scholar. I went to undergrad at MIT where I studied biology. And now I'm a first year MD-PhD student at Harvard and MIT in the HST program. And my research interests are in cellular and molecular biology and hobbies, which I've had a lot more time for since starting med school. Like low key, no, high key, med school is like way better than undergrad. I don't know if that's other people's experience too. I really have gotten into reading and cooking. So I can popcorn it to Miguel.
Hi, I'm Miguel. I am actually was never a Goldwater fellow, but I joined with Ryan, who was a Goldwater person the last seminar, and they invited me back. So I'm here to help in a different capacity as a non-Goldwater person, but happy to do it. I went to the Ohio State University for my undergrad, spent 2 years at Michigan afterwards, and I am now at Penn, a first year in the MSTP there. My research interests are more on the microbiology, virology side, and so I'm interested in kind of looking at like host pathogen interactions and going from there. In terms of hobbies, I actually am a power lifter, so that's what I do in my free time. And all popcorn to Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I was a 2019 scholar. I went to Carleton College, which is a liberal arts school in Minnesota, and now I am a first year at Penn with Miguel and Annie and Ryan, for all of you, those of you who know them. And research-wise, I'm in cancer bio, maybe like cancer immunology. And for hobbies, I have a lot of plants and vegetables in my garden, and I hike a lot. And I'm trying to start reading again post college, like for joy. So I will popcorn to Dan, maybe.
Hey everyone, I'm Dan. I'm a 2012 scholar from the Florida State University. I went really far away to my MD-PhD program at the University of Florida. Um, the My research interests, I'm PhD 5 now. My research interest is primarily computational approaches to genomics and cancer, and specifically cancer-causing herpes viruses. Fun fact, I'm in my like 4th year of training for my first Ironman half triathlon. It's been a long road, but I'll get there eventually. It's going to be fun. So,
Yeah, maybe I can popcorn too.
sorry, popcorn it over to Tanvi.
Hi, I'm Tanvi. I'm a first year MD-PhD student at Yale. I was a Goldwater scholar in 2020. What else? I came straight through from undergrad. I went to Rutgers University. Research interests are like inflammation, innate immune system, immunometabolism, etc. Hobbies, I'm a really big sports person. Got into F1 this year. Very excited about that. And also, I also love to read. And I'll popcorn to Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm a 2020 scholar, and I am an incoming M1, so I haven't started my MD-PhD yet at the University of Washington Fred Hutch MSTP program. And I'm interested in studying like cancer genomics and cancer evolution. And my hobbies are like rock climbing, hiking, backpacking, generally being outdoors. And I will popcorn to Annie.
Hi everyone, my name is Annie. I'm an MS1 at Penn with Sarah and Miguel. I went to Hopkins for undergrad. I'm a 2020 scholar. I did a post-bac at the NIH. Research interests are in cell fate, genomics, and cardiovascular regeneration, a little all over the place. But for hobbies, I'm interested in cooking. I've been getting a lot more into weightlifting, although still a beginner. And I also like watching Netflix and HBO shows with Sarah.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming today because I know that you are also really busy, would like for really either really cool rotation or other activity or final, but like I'm glad that like you guys can come and help with other students because like yeah, now I think that new scholar if they have they will make the most like of the application that all have to like share their story better. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, I also wanted to introduce myself. I'm Tien and I'm 22 scholar. And I start to help with the webinar committee since last year. And we are trying to do more webinar and invite a scholar from previous year to come and to share about their experience to help with new scholars so they can have more guidance and motive for like for fellowship or apply for PhD or MD-PhD. So yeah, yeah, I'm glad that Liang can join and also like see new scholar for this year. And yeah. So yeah, I think I will start with the example. Yeah, first we will go over the example of successful applicant, and after that I think that like I will have feedback panelists that all like what is the change of the of the essay and like how we can make it better. And yeah, and after that we will I think at depend if some student willing to share their writing, and so we will our other student can learn from their writing also. So yeah, but if not, I think that if anyone want to more, we can also go into breakout room and then we can have like specific feedback. Yeah. Yeah, I will start to share my screen with the
Should we like read it out loud so
Yeah.
we're all reading it together? Okay.
Yeah. Can you do that one?
Okay, I can start, and then if someone just wants to like take the next paragraph so I'm not reading the whole thing. Okay. So this is the YMD essay. It was a misty morning in San Diego as I, an inquisitive and energetic 7-year-old, joined my father and others for the National Audubon Society's weekly birdwatching hike at the Batiquitos Lagoon. We walked for what seemed an eternity, finally stopping at a small clearing. The guide called everyone over to look at some tiny footprints in the sand. Scrambling down from the rocks I'd just climbed, I landed in front of the group, managing to trample the very footprints we were supposed to be examining.
We continued on until we reached another vantage point. There, trying to identify the exact species of the bird in the tree, everyone frantically flipped through their field guides while simultaneously adjusting their binoculars to focus more closely on the bird. I, unable to hold my enthusiasm, blurted out that it was a yellow-rumped warbler. Much to my and everyone else's chagrin, I unwittingly scared the little bird and it flew away.
Despite this somewhat inauspicious start in ornithology, over time I became more disciplined in my interest in studying local and regional flora and fauna. As I explored a number of diverse environments, from oceans to deserts to forests, I developed a growing fascination with biology and with the complexity and diversity of life. Thus began a lifelong love of science in general and biology in particular.
In much the same way, I look for and identify various species of birds in their natural habitats, applies similar methodologies of classification, quantification, and comparison in examining cells in the research laboratory. Even more exciting than the rich and varied environments of the coastal wetlands and desert chaparral, wow, I don't know that word, the human body, with its myriad hiding places awaiting new discoveries, from its complex regulatory systems down to the intricacies of a single cell, provides an infinite source of possibilities for study and for advancing knowledge and understanding.
I'm interested in exploring the nature and function of proteins across various types of cells, in particular cancer cells, whose deviant and elusive behaviors and processes often remain a mystery. New discoveries can help prevent or eradicate what are arguably some of the most devastating human diseases. I aspire to be on the cutting edge of creating new technologies to gather and interpret data more efficiently to help prevent and treat cancer and other diseases.
While these experiences shaped my interest in biology, other facets of my life have been shaped by my deep passion for music, one which has been with me since I held a flute at age 5. Music has been so central to my life that it's become the primary language in which I think and interact with the world. Before I could read or write, I was able to read music. Serving as a fulcrum upon which my life is balanced, music has set me on a joyful and artistic journey and has propelled me both personally and creatively. Through music, I have developed and expanded my outlook on life and have explored emotion through sound. Most importantly, music has enabled me to connect with others in deep and meaningful ways, including with fellow musicians in both ensembles and orchestras, as well as with people for whom I'm performed.
One of the deepest and most gratifying connections began when I gave the first of many regular concerts and workshops to senior residents of the local Seacrest retirement village. I chose a program comprised mostly of Jewish melodies that many of the residents and I knew by heart. As I began to play, I looked around, amazed to see the effect of the music on the audience. When I played a cheerful tune, the residents enthusiastically clapped and sang along with pure and unabashed joy. When I played a more melancholic piece, the residents, some with tears streaming down their faces, soulfully sang along in Yiddish. Afterwards, a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor told me that it was the first time she'd heard these traditional songs in years, and she felt the happiest she'd felt since moving to Seacrest. And while I now play large concert halls in addition to retirement communities, performing at Seacrest remains my most enjoyable and fulfilling musical experience.
Connecting with and providing some level of comfort to those residents, many with physical ailments and some with memory issues and cognitive challenges, made me realize that I wanted to devote my life to working with and helping others. To my mind, there's no better way for me to accomplish this than becoming a physician scientist. A career in medical research and practice will afford me a unique opportunity to combine my passion for studying the complex machinery of life with my desire to make a positive and lasting impact on others.
Science and music have enriched my life enormously and have filled it with meaning and joy and inspired me to earn dual degrees in biomedical engineering at USC's Viterbi School of Engineering and in musical performance at the Thornton School of Music. I know that everyone has something about which they are equally passionate and that bringing meaning and joy to their lives. The value of medicine is not merely in improving people's health and longevity, but in allowing them to continue to pursue their passions to the fullest.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for having read it out loud for other students. So yeah, and then that is also like yeah for any student if have question or want to share with us like what you think about the essay. Yeah, feel free to unmute and yeah contribute to the conversation to the discussion. Yeah, I also I think that for me also I have a question like for the like personal statement what is the because like we also mentioned about research like rule our application too, so I wonder for the personal statement like what is the like the main focus that make it different with like the two other essay, and like what we should focus the most on here. Yeah.
I think my opinion on your question is like with the MD-PhD, there are a lot of essays that have very similar but like subtly different topics to them. But I think, especially for MD-PhD applicants, research probably plays a very significant role in why you want to go into medicine. But that being said, you have 2 essays like specifically dedicated to the MD-PhD path through your research experiences and why joint degree essays. And so with the why medicine essay, I would recommend really steering kind of farther from research and sticking closer to the like heart of the question of why do you want to be a physician? So thinking about experiences that led to like your first interest in medicine, and then experiences you've had that are like clinically oriented, that have both kind of can exhibit that you know the challenges that come with being a physician, and that you kind of possess some of the interpersonal skills to work with other people on this like deeper level. And then you have other essays to talk about like your research interests and the impact on the more like bioengineering or basic sciences side that you want to have.
Yeah, I agree with Ali completely. I think that's also the approach I took for my essays. Like it's definitely natural and like good for you to like mention research in the YMD essay, like because I'm sure like it may have played a part in like wanting to be a doctor, but you want to like show them that like you have reasons for wanting to practice medicine. And another thing, I just wanted to share like one of my strategies that I used when I was like drafting and redrafting all my essays, that maybe like if we want, we could like try that with this example. It's like really easy to get lost in like just like writing really good narratives and being like, wow, that's like some beautiful like story. But then you also want to like go back to the substance and make sure that you're conveying like the main points that like express why you want to be a doctor. So I would like go in with like a plan, and then I would write something on paper, and it would like I'd go off on tangents too sometimes. But then once I had a draft, I would go back and like reverse outline. So like each paragraph, I would be like, what am I trying to convey like beyond all the fluff in this paragraph? So if you want, we can like do that for the first few paragraphs of this essay real quick. If you want to scroll up. Yeah, so and like anyone else, like feel free to chime in. I'll just like start off with like what I'd say the reverse outline of the first few paragraphs is. So it looks like the first 3 paragraphs, which is actually a pretty long time, is just like dedicated to why the author got interested in science. It's like not directly related to why they're interested in medicine. I'm not sure I personally would spend like quite as long on that, although it is like a really unique hobby they have, like bird watching, that makes them interesting. But in terms of like the substance, I did feel like that's a lot of writing to spend on why they're interested in science. And then
I was just going to add too, like a common thing with all of these essays is like it seems like a lot. You've got to write 3 big essays, but then once you start trying to fit the entirety of your life and your journey into 3 pieces of paper, it gets really difficult. And you have a very small amount of characters to try to show someone who you are. And while this was like very beautifully written, I feel like it took me 3 paragraphs to even start to learn anything about them outside of the fact that they liked birds and like had a super cool hobby, and I agree with what you said too. And like the other thing for me with this was I feel like we didn't get anything about why they were interested in medicine at all until almost the very end. And so that was kind of like the opposite of what the advice that I got when I was writing a lot of these was like kind of be upfront with why you want to do this, and then use the rest of it as the story to explain those reasons. Whereas here, like it's a very beautiful narrative, but I had to read the entire thing to understand the last section. And so I felt like if you were to take that almost to the front of the essay and then use the stories to get back to those points, you have the better chance of your reader who might be skimming some of these to say, okay, I understand their reasons. If I have time, I'll read the whole really cool story. But some people may not do that, which could be a problem.
Something I also feel like I never totally got from this essay kind of addresses the question of why do you want to be a doctor more so than why do you want to be like a healthcare professional? And I think that's something you need to at least like touch on, in my opinion, in your why medicine essay. Because like going in generally with like, I like health sciences and I want to help people. So the logical intersection as a doctor, it's like there's just as logical of an intersection to be a pharmacist or a nurse or a whatever, physical therapist and stuff like that. So really using the experiences you've already had within a clinical setting to be able to call on some of the specific roles that doctors have in interacting with patients, and then being able to like make a statement about like why you want to be able to play that role that you've seen and you know is specific to like what a physician does, more than what a nurse would do or an occupational therapist or something.
Oh, Dan, I think we can't hear you unless that's just me.
I did it again. Building off of what Ali was just saying, the role of physician has a lot of opportunities and corresponding challenges that I think, are unique in the healthcare setting, certainly different than other tiers of healthcare professional. And so demonstrating that you know a little bit of what you're getting into, I think can be helpful in terms of mentioning some of the difficulty that you will see, and then the opportunity to help those people overcome challenges as a physician, or at least to intervene where possible in their lives, just because I didn't really get much of that from this particular essay, although I agree it was absolutely beautifully written.
Yeah, I actually agree because like when we apply for college, like we show more about like a person who we are, like rather than like for like particular like essay like explaining why we like want to become a doctor or become to physician scientist. And also like I think it's also like challenging for some student also like when they apply like they have the exposure with like patient, right? But like how to explain that they want to like that role instead of other role in a healthcare team. So I think it's this thing you mentioned that we have to like more clearly and spend more of the time in the essay to convey that. Yeah.
This seems like a really obvious piece of advice, but something I did over and over was just like literally list out the reasons that I wanted to be a doctor and like specific experiences that like accompanied each of those reasons. And then like once I had a really like long open brainstorming session like that, I sort of decided how to like pick and choose which experiences like best illustrated which point. But that kind of made sure I was like really focused on the substance while still getting the narrative in.
I think this is really good advice because sometimes like we have like a lot of like event that happen and make me want to go to medicine, but like yeah, because of the like space why like we need to like select like what is the most like major and like important to really like explain like the reason why we want and support to our like the reason like why we want to become a doctor and and physician and scientist. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can move on to the second essay so we can have like to see that how people have like different approach. Oh, Vaishnavi, can you start with the first paragraph?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, is this still a YMD essay from a different person?
Oh yeah, it's still the YMD. Yeah.
Okay. I will never forget the infectious joy that spread throughout the courtyard, causing a domino of genuine laughter and smiles down the line of volunteers. The source of such joy was a man with a sock puppet, making his way through the line for what could be his only meal of the day. I marveled at his charisma and ability to elicit genuine laughter from adults using only a sock puppet. Experiencing his unique personality every Saturday morning served as a constant reminder of my decision to pursue medicine. I am motivated to have the unique backgrounds and experiences of my patients inform my medical practice in a way that improves their access to healthcare and treatment outcomes. I think that's a really strong start.
When I moved to San Diego for college, I envisioned a career solely in research. My interest in science largely stemmed from high school science classes and a high school English essay on embryonic stem cells. I joined the Willard Lab 3 months into college, determined to make use of the seemingly infinite resources that were now at my disposal in my new city. My lab studies hematopoietic stem cells in the hopes of informing new therapeutic methods for leukemia. I realized the potential of our work in driving medical innovation, as well as the necessity for collaborations with physicians to succeed in bringing our discoveries to the clinic. These experiences cultivate my desire to play a role in the translational process and bring these discoveries to patients who would tangibly benefit.
As my interest in serving patients developed, my friends and I began volunteering at meal services in the San Diego area. I quickly became aware of many underlying problems facing patients, including mental health and dental hygiene. I saw the potential value in connecting these community members to health resources, so I co-founded San Diego Health Connect, a student organization that connects community members to free health resources through one-on-one conversations. It was through San Diego Health Connect that I encountered the man with the sock puppet. His enduring positive attitude and charisma inspired me to seek more meaningful conversations with other community members and learn about the life experiences that have shaped their needs.
During one of these conversations, a man asked if I had a resource for diabetes and went on to tell me about how being homeless made his condition difficult to manage. This conversation made it clear that having earlier access to a physician who took these factors into account would have helped him manage his diabetes more effectively. I also tried to refer a man to an optometry clinic that provides free glasses. However, the clinic only ships the glasses to a mailing address, which made a difficult resource for a homeless person to access. Through listening to stories and unique perspectives such as these, I realized the importance of taking personal background and lived experiences into account when helping individuals. Ultimately, these conversations revealed the potential impact of a physician who serves patients with their unique circumstances in mind.
These experiences made me want to learn about the unique stories of individuals in a more direct patient care setting. I was fortunate enough to be accepted into the Pathmaker internship, allowing me to observe patient-clinician interactions and to take part in direct patient care. My experiences in San Diego Health Connect inspired me to pay close attention to patient stories, including why they were there and their motivations for improvement. This was often possible by listening to the pre-treatment conversation between the therapist and the patient, or by conversing with the patient during breaks in the session. The appreciation expressed by patients revealed the value of active listening in and of itself. However, I also learned how physicians and other clinicians use a patient's background and situation to inform their patient care.
Before each session, the physical therapist explained the patient situation and personality to me, and they sometimes consulted with the physician about how these factors would inform their treatment plan. For instance, a woman hospitalized due to physical injury was diagnosed with cancer in the same visit. The therapist and physician made her unique situation a central factor when deliberating their treatment strategy, and they opted for less intense therapy. Seeing how much she appreciated the chance to use her muscles without the stress of intense therapy showed me that compassion is an inextricable part of personalizing patient care. I hope to emulate this compassion as a physician by valuing the unique concerns of each patient and taking direct action to serve their individual needs.
My experiences.
Oh,
wait.
Go ahead.
Sorry. My experiences have highlighted how exercising compassion to leverage the unique circumstances of patients can improve their health outcomes and satisfaction. I realized the need for compassion and personalized healthcare within impoverished communities. Watching patients tangibly benefit from these principles solidified my desire to do the same in my future career. Exercising compassion to serve patients in the context of their individual stories will be a guiding principle in my career as a physician.
Yeah, I think it's really a good like story because it really like have a lot of like really cool like the interaction and the with the patient and how they learn from exam, and also like with it experience it also inform like and also like shape the way that how they want to practice as a doctor in the future. So yeah.
One thing I'll add, I think another strength of this essay is that it's very explicit. I mean, so you don't have to go searching for the meaning or searching for the reasons. The author sort of lays out for you, and especially for considering someone who's reading this essay very quickly in the midst of whatever 100 other essays, it's important to sort of say the words as you mean them and be a little bit more explicit so they don't have to go searching for a meaning or trying to infer what you're trying to say.
I think one strength, it's like a double-edged sword. A strength of this essay is that it's very cohesive and it keeps it like you will remember that this person really wants to like serve the individual like holistic needs of a patient. But on the other hand, it's like a tad bit repetitive, like with the phrasing of like the same sort of sentence. So I think like a little bit of a balance for that would have been nice by like sharing some other insights, but I'm just being really harsh on it. It was a really good essay.
Yeah, I just want to add on that it is a very cohesive essay. I also like really liked how they transition between each idea. So like this person opted for like a non-linear timeline in their essay. They started with like a hook that was not like the genesis of when they wanted to do medicine, but it related to something that they mentioned later on. And it's something that I also use in my essay. So I think it's really important when you're doing that to bring it back in so they remember. And then the transitions can really help with that when you transition from each paragraph to each paragraph.
Something I also like, kind of building off what Tanvi was saying, is like they're very explicit about like what they've taken away from each experience, and I like that they kind of preceded it by a story that highlighted that, like that attribute about themselves or an experience that highlighted like why that certain quality is so important to them. Because I think sometimes a pitfall you can come across is that you just sort of start like listing like I like this and I'm like a really careful person and I'm really communicative and stuff, but these come across a lot nicer when you show them. And then similarly, statements I think you can come across a lot like it's important to listen to people or important to like care for underserved communities or something, but being able to use even these short like 1 to 2 sentence stories about like the specific need of somebody from an underserved community really highlights like why you understand that. And then the very explicit description after that like 1 or 2 sentence story of like, and that moment really emphasized to me why this is so important, makes that like it doesn't feel so generic when it comes in, because otherwise it's like not specific to you and this essay is all about you.
And to just build off of that point that Ali was talking about too, I really liked in this one how you kind of saw not only just the experience, but you saw how it affected them, and they told you how it changed them and specifically what it made them want to do. And so I think that that's one of the things that I find like really great when I like read these, or even when I was like getting, going through this whole process too, is like if you can demonstrate that you have an ability to be introspective, that you understand why you did the things you did, how they impact you, how they challenged you to grow as a person, how they directed you to where you went from there and to who you became from that. That's, I think, really shows a level of maturity that that a lot of people will not be able to write about in that same way in a lot of other instances, because like it shows that you understand who you are and who you're becoming, and that there was so much that went into the developments, and also show that like, hey, I understand who I think I want to be too.
Yeah, I think one more thing that kind of like made me a little anxious when I was writing essays was like the idea that I would come across as stereotypical, or that, oh, I'm sure people have read a variant of this exact same essay before. But like don't worry about that because there's like only a limited number of reasons at the end of the day that people go into medicine. As all the other panelists were saying, like what's important is that you bring in like your stories and your experience and write it in your voice. And you don't have to be unique, you just have to be genuine. I think like that was a major takeaway for me.
Yeah, building off what Vaishnavi was saying, like I completely agree and second that. Like there are a limited number of reasons for the most part that people go into medicine. And I think the flip is also worth remembering that like those limited number of reasons, like for me, something I talked about was one of my parents having cancer growing up. And like I'm sure hundreds of kids, just like in the city I grew up in, had a parent that had cancer growing up. And not all of them became physicians or had any interest in becoming physicians. And so it's worth like thinking about that experience and then trying to dig a little bit deeper about maybe an experience you had before that or something really about like how you tick that made it so that experience that isn't like notably unique to me was a big seed for like why I started on the path that I did.
I think also an additional thing that maybe to me, I thought this essay was awesome, but that it didn't have, which is another sort of route that you can take, is that like this person chose to talk a lot about their experiences and like as everybody's been mentioning, like what those experiences meant to them, how it informed what they want to do with their life and why they want to go into medicine. And that's like super important to include in your essay. And I certainly did. I think there's an additional space if you believe that you have skills that will benefit you as a future clinician, that you can talk about those there. And so I think this person didn't really choose to do that. They mostly chose to talk about sort of the experiences and what they learned from them. But if you think that you have a skill set that you use in any environment, like that can be really beneficial as well. So like in my essay, I spoke about being like a TA, which sounds kind of silly, but I think there's like a lot of skills in listening to people, understanding them, finding different ways to communicate that like don't really at first match one-to-one with medicine, but when you like sort of start to think about it, they do. And so you can also sort of create your own little like niche as well in the skills that you have and the ways that you might be developing those skills in certain areas and then bringing them to medicine as a clinician later. So they didn't really do that here, but I think that's another like avenue to try to sort of show who you are and show like work that you've already done and like skills that you've already developed that will serve you in your career as well.
Yeah, I think it's really great to let like others know that don't be afraid to like be like so like maybe may seem that because like I think a lot of like applicants also scared that they will be if they just like list off their experience and then all people do the same thing that will have like working at EMT or like have an interaction with patient and then they will it's not like stand out, it's just like talking about that. But I think it's like what makes it application it different, that like how they like what they learn from each experience and how they can learn and then what they think that like they can and what they do to like develop their skill and which will help them to become a successful MD later. So yeah, I think we will move to the next essay. This is the
Could I ask a few questions about that essay before we move on?
Oh yeah.
So for this one specifically, it only like talks about research for like a sentence in the beginning where it said that they wanted to do research originally. Do you think it'd be more to add do you think it'd be better to add just a short paragraph in there about like why they still want to continue to do research in their career, or is it fine with just all the clinical stuff?
I think that's why you have the other two essays, right? So like the why MD-PhD essay is where you can start to tie more of that, like those connections between both fields. But then you have like, if I remember the number right, like 10,000 characters to write about everything and anything research related under the sun that you want to share, your projects, your journey, your growth, your interest development. And so that like, I really liked this one because there wasn't a huge section on I want to be a physician scientist. Here's all the projects that I did. And like they did mention, like you said, that there's one sentence about research, but I think that like this was great because you have the opportunity with these essays to show these like silos of who you are, and then you use the MD-PhD one to kind of bridge those pieces. So I personally, and I'd be interested to hear what everyone else said too, I don't think you need more research in this one because you have so much space to talk about research in all the other parts of the application.
I would
I
agree with
completely.
Miguel.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Miguel. I think this has like enough about research, if not like, I think even what they had on the research, if they had one more like impactful patient moment they really wanted to include, I think you could even cut back on how much research. And like they said a little bit about like the scope of the lab and the project. I think you could even just leave it to be like, I learned about whatever they said, stem cells, and that got me interested. So I joined a lab where I interacted with patients, and that's why I joined a clinic. And that like is a very logical transition. It makes a lot of sense that they included it, but I don't think you really have to touch on like the research, why you want to continue it, or anything like that in this essay.
Yeah, I completely agree. For context, I didn't mention research at all in my personal statement. It was fine. And I think like the way they did it here was really smooth. And I agree with Ali that if they had another impactful patient experience, that probably would be better to add in because like an advice that I got when I was writing was that the MD statement should stand alone. Someone reading this should understand why you want to be a physician. So the more personal experience you can bring in to show why, like how you understand what a physician means and why you want to be a physician is better.
Yeah, I think I did include like a little bit on research in my YMD because I think similar to this person, I think it was this essay, like I also reached a point when I was deciding like MD, PhD both, where I like considered doing like PhD only, but then I like used it to say like I love research, but I realized that I also really want to take care of people, and that's how I tied it in. So like definitely it's not like a red flag if you mention research in your essay. Like I'm sure schools would see it as a good thing as long as you seem like someone who would also want to like be a physician and like see the synergy between those two things. So I don't think you can like go wrong either way, but I agree with what the other panelists are saying that there is a lot of space in the other essays specifically to mention why you want the MD PhD.
If I could build a little bit off of what Vaishnavi was saying, the in some cases it might be a tactical decision, right? Because I know plenty of people who applied, but they applied dually to MD PhDs and to MD only programs, in which case the MD only, excuse me, personal statement kind of needs to stand alone, separate from a focus on research, which doesn't necessarily help you for your MD only applications. I think, so the goal of this part of it is to kind of really capture your motivations. And I think for some people, the motivations to do an MD PhD are tied intrinsically into the motivations to become a physician. I also personally was considering research only versus MD PhD, and so actually that played a major role in my personal statement, or not a huge role, but some small component. However, maybe if you arrived at your decision to apply MD PhD in a different way, your narrative might reflect that different path and might not include a lot about research. So it really, the goal is for them to get an understanding, a compelling understanding by the end of the personal statement of why you want to do medicine. And maybe that does include a significant amount about research, and maybe it doesn't. Should not include a lot of detail about the research because, as other panelists are mentioning, there's a lot of space for that. But maybe it'll include some of the motivations for the research. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I won't like beat the dead horse here, but I received feedback on my like first draft of my statement from like clinicians saying like there shouldn't be any research in this statement, and then like MD PhDs saying how can you not mention research in your MD statement? You're going into an MD PhD. And they were all people that I trusted at institutions that I valued, and like it was very confusing for me. So that's all to say, like, just like what everybody's saying here is it's really just like about being genuine. And if like for me, research and like the nitty gritty of like how a human body works was part of what made me excited about medicine. And so for me, that was like an important part of my statement. And I wasn't getting into the details of like what my projects were or like what my data looked like. It was more just like, I care about these, like this process. And that's what makes me excited about like medicine as well as all the human parts about medicine. And so for me, like it made sense, but for other people, it doesn't. And like, I think, you know, I got some feedback from like advisors and stuff who had read my essays, sort of like telling me to like play the game and being like, I don't know, like an MD-PhD committee isn't going to like this or isn't going to like that. And like, the truth is it doesn't really matter because you want to just be who you are. And you also have no idea, like every school has a different reading process and like who reads it first. Like, do you get screened by MD? Do you get screened by MD-PhD? Is the PhD program alone looking at you? Like, there's just like, I don't think it's worth it personally to like play the game. And I think that a genuine essay is going to read genuinely. And if you're sort of trying to rig the system somehow, it's like, that's also going to become apparent. So I think just like be genuine to who you are, see how it fits, and like just sort of like trust your gut on it as well, because like everybody's experience and path to this decision is different. And that's really what you're trying to convey.
Thanks, Sarah and Dan. That actually was super helpful advice. I just had one like last small detail question. So when we're talking about clinical experience, how in detail can we be? So for example, I already wrote my essays and I like talked about conversations that I had with patients and stuff like that. And I don't really want to be like violating HIPAA or anything. I didn't say names for sure, but I did say that one of my patients, like he was telling me about how he lost his son to a drunk driver and stuff like that. Is that okay to mention, or should we leave like personal details of people's lives out, even though we're not mentioning their names?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's totally okay. I don't think you're violating HIPAA in that sense. If it helps, like I use pseudonyms, so I don't have to keep referring to someone as the patient or something. I could still use a name, and it was a little bit more humanizing. But it shouldn't be an issue talking about what you learned from your patients.
Yeah, as long as you don't like put their exact age, where they were seen, when they were seen, what precise thing they were seen for. Like, I think the idea of HIPAA is just that you shouldn't be able to easily identify someone based on like private information that you're revealing, right? So yeah, I agree.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I think the reasonable person standard also applies here as well. If you have concern about it, then maybe someone else would have concern about it. But it sounds like there's nothing that you've described to have concern about from what I can tell.
Okay, I just want to err on the side of caution because obviously I don't want to do something that the committee looking at it would be like, oh, that's kind of inappropriate. So
yeah, I think we can it's really great advice that we have like two example and can see that how different people like try to explain it in different way. So yeah, I think that we can go to the MD with DSA to have more experience about like how it's different compared to other to let's say
While the diagnosis and treatment of disease, medicine, and healing have existed in varying forms for millennia, medical science and medical research are, in many respects, still in their infancy. Each new discovery opens a tiny window into a seemingly infinite universe of knowledge. Each new answer poses 100 new questions. Each new solution creates myriad new problems. Because there will always be new phenomena to discover, new products to develop, and new procedures to test, medical research is, to my mind, one of the most exciting, interesting, and dynamic fields of science.
My interest in conducting research emerged in the classroom and grew exponentially in the laboratory. Undergraduate classes at the University of Southern California gave me a broad overview of the major scientific disciplines, as well as specialized training in bioengineering. Both provided a strong foundation for conducting research in biotechnology and for beginning my training in the field of medicine. Molecular biology introduced me to the complexity and diversity of processes within a single cell. I am fascinated by how microscopic units function as intricate machines powering all aspects of life.
Working as a research assistant in a chemical engineering laboratory has been equally formative. I've worked on multiple projects investigating the metabolism of cancer cells to identify targets for potential therapeutics. In the laboratory, I have become increasingly interested in using technology to gather data and to solve problems. My research has benefited from the use of mass spectrometry systems capable of separating and quantifying thousands of molecules from a single drop of liquid. The massive amount of information these systems provide serves to reinforce the notion that until now, research has only begun to scratch the surface of scientific knowledge.
By earning an MD-PhD, I hope to serve as a link between the research laboratory and the hospital, directly applying the knowledge gained in scientific research, medicine, and technology to advance healthcare and improve people's lives. As a physician scientist working directly with patients who can reap the benefits of knowledge gained through research, I would be at the intersection of science and medicine in the discovery of new knowledge and deeper understanding. The field of cancer biology is of particular interest to me, and I aspire to be on the cutting edge of both medical research and treatment. I can just finish this since it's kind of short. Through advanced training as a physician and as a scientist, I hope to understand the complexities of clinical medicine, such as drug delivery and surgical procedures, as well as the molecular biology and biochemistry that contribute to innovative research to bring novel treatments from the petri dish to the patient.
I can start off real quick by saying one thing that I'm lacking. I was really laughing while reading this because I didn't really look at any examples, but I could swear that I have almost the same text in like 4 different places in my equivalent essay. So it just really goes to show that there are a limited amount of topics you can talk about some topics. But that being said, I would hope to see in this essay aspirations. I found it a little bit vague. Just connecting the bench to the bedside, that's admirable, but I would personally want an example of a hope that you specifically have in relation to being an MD-PhD in the field of, with the goal of treating this patient population. You're not wedded to that, but having the connection to some specific idea that you're interested in, I think makes it even a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think like the thing missing in this essay was that there were a lot of like general statements, like broad strokes about the state of science, which I don't know, it like seemed like unnecessary to me because presumably anyone reading this like already like knows that too about science. And again, the question is like, why do you want to be an MD-PhD? Not like, why is the MD-PhD career like a good one for a person to have? So the way I approached it, I didn't like say I wanted to treat a specific like set of patients or specific disease. I was like really vague about my research interests, honestly, but I did include like specific instances that I was shadowing where I like realized I wanted to connect the clinic to the bench, or like instances in my research where I thought like the opposite. So just like making it you.
I'll just follow up and clarify a little bit. I mean, I was more speaking of like a field that I found exciting. So for my case, it was the field of cancer genomics and the potential to apply new applications in genomic sequencing to understanding and treating cancer. And so I just thought like adding some little bit of specificity to your excitement. And I thought this really did a great job of communicating excitement writ broad, but I would like to see a little bit more of like a specific idea or something specifically that one finds interesting.
And sort of on Vaishnavi's point about like including anecdotes, I think that's sort of what this essay is missing the most. Like a lot of people include a lot of encounters and sort of distinct experiences in their YMD essay, and then forget that they can do that also in their YMD PhD essay. So you can still bring back like specific instances that showed you that this is the career you want to do, and you can still sort of have the same structure of like a anecdote or a narrative followed by some sort of reflection, and then bring it all together at the end. So it doesn't have to be like this essay was all sort of introspective or all self-reflective, as opposed to like a little bit of narration and then self-reflection.
I think also like the part of like the why MD PhD, well, first of all, it's like important and you're going to say it a bunch of times when you're interviewing. So you kind of have to like figure out what your personal thing is. But like there's a tempting sort of baseline of it, like formula that's like it's like X plus Y equals Z, like it's MD plus PhD equals MD-PhD. And I think that like I've seen people's essays that really lay it out like that, just like here's why I want to be a doctor and here's why I want to be a PhD and I want to do both. But I think that it's like much more compelling if you can find the ways that those interact with each other. So as like Vaishnavi was saying before, like saying like, here are clinical experiences I had, and here are moments when I found myself thinking about science or thinking about research when I was in a clinical environment, like how I was drawing those connections, and like here's research moments for me and like how I thought those connected to the clinic. And then sort of being able to say like, there are these sort of gaps for me, or what, I don't know what the language is to use exactly, but here's moments when like I realized that there was something else that I wanted to be doing that connected to this. And how are you like synergizing these two things together so that it's not just like X plus Y, it's like a weird mismatch of like X and Y all together, which is kind of silly sounding, but I think that that's pretty compelling. And I think I agree with people that this one was like pretty vague for me, and I didn't really see fully like either X or Y. And it is like sort of, you want to convince them of like both of those pieces and why you want both of those together and how they inform each other.
Yeah, I totally agree that we should like more specific about all the reason, like about like how we think about it more than or how we see that OSB, how the physician scientist that way will be, but like more about like reflect about our journey, like about our experience, and also think that like oh how we can apply it and how we see that all how we can play a role as both physician and scientist. Yeah, I think we can go to, oh, I just want to add that if any student have any question or about the essay or something like that, yeah, just feel free to let us know. I think we can move to the second MD-PhD essay.
I can start this one. When I first began lab work, I viewed research and medicine as two separate spheres of science. My lab research seeks to inform a protocol for the in vitro production of clinically viable hematopoietic stem cells. Over time, I became more knowledgeable of my project's place in the larger picture, including its clinical applications. Applying to scholarships and presenting at conferences developed my understanding of how my research contributes to the translational effort, transforming my view of research from a separate sphere to an upstream and adjacent stage of the medical process.
This transformation changed how I perceived the research of other scientists. As I listened to research presentations, I noticed that many research projects did not make translational efforts a priority. A scientist might tie a signaling pathway to cancer because it is dysregulated, rather than focus on how their research would inform a treatment. This pattern made me aware of the need for professionals to help overcome the barriers that prevent basic science from its translation to medical application.
While shadowing physical therapists, I came across a woman who could barely move after hip replacement surgery. I felt frustrated with the lack of less intensive alternatives. The pain on the faces of patients like her served as a reminder that every medical advance alleviates current and future human suffering. Conversely, when shadowing an interventional radiologist, I observed a procedure in which the patient came in and left the same day. This stark contrast illustrated the importance of improving existing treatments to be more tolerable and strengthened my resolve to play a role in such innovations.
Formal scientific education would transform the way I tackle complex problems, providing me with a different yet complementary analytic lens than the one cultivated by medical education. Additionally, MD-PhD programs synergistically integrate these educational endeavors, allowing me to practice facilitating the crosstalk between medicine and research throughout my education. An MD-PhD program also provides access to a large network of physicians and scientists and a community of like-minded peers, which will help me develop as a professional.
Conducting research aimed at informing a new treatment for leukemia has illustrated the large gaps in cancer treatments and the important role regenerative medicine will play in filling those gaps. I hope to leverage my MD-PhD training to run an academic lab in cancer biology, organize clinical trials, and specialize in oncology to treat the very patients whose tumors I study at the bench. As cancer treatment strategies change, I want to help ensure that cancer research reflects those changes. I look forward to helping the medical community use research to improve the lives of patients, as well as help having my patients inform my research. I think this essay is pretty strong, like on a first read through. And one thing I like about it is that like the author is very self-aware because they say that they want to do like translational research, but then like a common rebuttal you get from some people, like if you're an MD PhD who wants to do translational research, they'll say like, you can do that with like an MD. Why do you need the PhD? So I really like the paragraph where he's like, this formal scientific education would like give him an analytic lens. Yeah, overall, I thought it's really strong.
Yeah, I'll just second that. That was actually the sentence that really stood out to me most in this whole essay. I thought it was really well structured and like convincing, but I think there's like a lot of temptation just to talk about like what it is you want to do down the road, and that's really important, but you're also committing to like a training path and a very like long training path, and that's really important. And like personally in my interview experience, I was pushed a lot in interviews about why I thought I needed a PhD and why I needed training in a PhD program, not just do you want to do research or not, because like I had convinced them that I want to do research, but like why did I really want this training and how is it different from MD training? And so that's not something that I thought to do at all in my essay, and I wish I had, because I think that's actually really great. And they did it like very succinctly as well. They didn't like waste a lot of words on it, but I think that was like by far the sentence that like stuck with me the most from this essay.
And I feel like this one did all the things that we were talking about we wish we would have saw in the last one, right? There were some of those narratives in there. There was projections to what they think they wanted to do. We've kind of touched on like two things that I just wanted to like reiterate as general advice to people that are getting ready to apply is like, one, be ready to understand and defend why you want to do each degree individually and why you want to do both and why not one separately. That's, you are going to get asked that, and the more you can kind of understand and have those reasons like fresh and like a good reason as to why both, the better off that you'll be in all of them. And I do think here too, just to highlight again what Sarah had mentioned, is in terms of like not just understanding that you want to do both, but also understanding what the training is, the best that you can from the outside is important. And that will kind of help. That's what, at least in my case, like helped me understand like, okay, this is who I want to become. This is what I've been able to understand the training is like, and this is why it's a perfect match for who I think I want to be. And I think that if you can kind of think through those things, you'll be able to have that personalized reason for yourself when you get to your essays and to your interviews later on.
Just real briefly, add to Miguel, nail on the head. They PhDs will ask you why you want to do the MD as well. MDs will ask you why you want to do the PhDs as well. MD PhDs will be like, I don't have to ask that because I understand, but tell me anyway. And if you're going to practice interview questions, I would highly suggest you practice that one with a bunch of different people, because it is one that I'm pretty sure I got asked on every interview multiple times from different angles.
And sort of in that vein, I think it's important to have an explicit answer for it. I think people like waffle a lot, or they sort of think about why they want both degrees, and it's hard to sort of put that into words that actually have meaning and sort of are actually reflective of the training path. So, and like writing your essay is a great place to sort of get that out, because you have to write it in words. So having it in your essay makes it a lot easier when it comes time to like do your interviews. So you have something to talk about.
I'll just add one more thought. So, and this might be a hot take. Please, other panelists, please feel free to weigh in. But in my experience so far, I've actually been surprised at how different the end goals of the training of both degrees have been. Like, you think that an MD will be preparation to do research just fine, and maybe it depends a lot on your training program, but I would now strongly contest that assertion should anyone make it. Sure, MDs do research all the time, but the training is vastly different between them, in my personal experience. And so just if you could spend a little bit of time thinking about the potential, the benefits that are unique to each path, the clinical the training, the interpersonal interactions, the ability to directly intervene in clinical medicine on one side, the highly analytical training, and the really strong ability to critically think on the other side, that I think can be a very strong addition to the components of this component of the application specifically. And I think we saw that a lot here in this particular essay. No rebuttals?
Yeah, I think it's very like helpful to know that because sometimes like I think that an advice I have for like when I apply Goldwater that we focus more on like PhD part more and explain how we need the MD, and now like sometimes like always thinking we doing research a lot, right? So it's like more than explaining like why MD like training is necessary. But yeah, but like also like see it in other way that why the PhD training is also necessary too, because we have no training. And I think it's really like like a good thing that we also like need to think about it and mention about it in our essay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, one last thing. I like how this person included like their vision for what they wanted to do with their MD PhD. That's also something I did. Because yeah, that answer will be like quite different depending on the person, like in terms of the sorts of research you want to be involved in and like what proportion of time you want to spend in each. Of course, you're not wedded to it, but it just like gives programs an idea of like what your goal is right now.
Yeah, I think question from Sakat in the chat that he asked he is asking if we interest in translational research with an added component of entrepreneurship. How we suggest incorporate this into the personal statement and why the MD-PhD essay?
Like, do you mean like starting a biotech company potentially or something like that?
Or yeah, something like that. Yeah, like work in for like startup or I work in for the company or something like that. Yeah.
I can elaborate over talking if that's easier. Kind of starting and practicing. For example, my interest is in chronic pain and becoming an anesthesiologist by practice, but then also being able to spin off startups or social enterprises that are able to help children with special needs or people going through the opioid epidemic. So how would we kind of incorporate that additional impact in addition to having a lab and practicing on the side?
So I don't know if any of the panelists like had that kind of aspiration. Like I don't personally, but I think like if I'm being honest, I think like the reaction of the reader could be highly dependent on like their it's just like some folks might be a little bit more traditional and kind of like see the physician scientist path as like not including like entrepreneurship, but I do know like now like there's growing acceptance of like beyond just the cookie cutter traditional path of just like research and clinic with some proportion. Like people have become more accepting of that stuff. I think definitely if you said something like clinic plus running a lab plus entrepreneurship, I think that would be taken pretty well. If you were to just say clinic and entrepreneurship, I think they might start to question why you need the PhD training, but that's just my personal take.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it kind of circling back to what a lot of people have said on the panel throughout this is like these essays are really about understanding who you are as a person on a deeper level. And so like I think there's a lot of opportunities in which you could tie in entrepreneurship, either through experiences that you've already had in entrepreneurship, or like if there's somebody you shadow that did entrepreneurship and you really like enjoyed seeing that and it made you feel like you wanted that or something like that. I think there's a lot of angles in which you could insert it in a little bit. And I agree with Vaishnavi. I think there's probably a split group of people that would think it's super unconventional and not like it, and also a handful of like adcoms that would think it's kind of unconventional and really cool. So I would just say like I would caution maybe against putting it like so strongly that you're wed to primarily doing entrepreneurship and then having clinical practice be like a back burner side thing. And make sure it comes off just that like both the training you get from a PhD and the training you get from an MD will be like integral parts of the career you want to have beyond just being an entrepreneur for like developing an app or something.
I just had a quick thought, again, depending on what you mean by entrepreneurship. I've had a lot of like MD, PhD professors who've like spun off companies based on research in their lab. So if you said it that way, that would maybe be like a little bit of a balance of what you want to do and something that would be more like conventional and like accepted. But I'm not sure, like at the end of the day, be genuine to what you want to do, but it's also kind of like a balance where you don't want to seem like too out there.
And it sounds like your motivation for doing that was somewhat altruistic, like you were using this as the means to the end to do good. And if you're gonna include it, I think that would be a great way to do so. Specify it as one way you might be able to leverage your training to provide this necessary product or service that people otherwise would not get. Because I will say that it is surprising the distance between a research idea, a functional product, et cetera, a good clinical test, and the actual utilization of that in the clinical setting can be a monumental distance. And so setting out to help tackle that, to shorten it using your training, I think could be easily a very strong argument if you have that specific inclination.
And I'll briefly take like the other side of the argument in the sense where I feel like you can sort of be genuine about what you're interested in and what you like want out of your career. And it'll probably help you find a program that is also interested in developing that in you and in their physician scientists, and sort of have ways to leverage those abilities and make you able to leverage that in your career. So that's like another way to think about it. Also, like you don't necessarily have to worry too much about playing the game. You can potentially focus more on like showing yourself and then finding a program that will hopefully be able to help you with that.
I think you can also just sorry.
I think I'll quickly add, like if you're in looking for programs that will be maybe more supportive of that, a good place to look is like match lists. Every now and again, people will not go into a residency and just transition onto like a biotech company or something like that. Or if you look at like notable alumni of a school, sometimes you'll see like if there's several of them working in more like entrepreneurship and technology versus like every single notable alumni, every single batch being like super cookie cutter.
And I was just going to say, like, to Dan's point, I think that you can think about the language that you use to set this up. And it sounds like you have like needs that you're observing, like gaps in care or in technology or resources that you're trying to like think about solving, and doing that through a startup or some sort of like venture of some sort. And so if you frame it as I'm seeing these gaps in care and I'm interested in creating this venture to close those gaps, as opposed to framing it as like I'm just interested in ventures for the sake of ventures, I think that is, from my opinion, like likely to be more compelling. And I think depending on what those gaps are that you're trying to fill and what you see as the need, there may be space for that, like not in this essay as well. Like if you think that you can't fold that into like exactly into the MD-PhD, like if they're more like MD driven sort of like public health issues or something like that, that's like less tech and research driven, you might fill space for that in your MD essay and not in this one. So you could think about where it's going to fit that makes the most sense, that really is in line with like what your objectives are with that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah, feel free to add the question like anytime. So yeah, yeah, I think we can continue with the with the next essay, the research, the significant research experience essay.
This one is really long, right? We could take the approach of like just giving our advice or like how we approached it.
Yeah, I also think that because like different research will be like really different. I think that if we like have like give like how we approach with it and from our research, like I think it will be like more useful. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm unmuted. I can start with like a few general tips. So for context, I applied straight through from undergrad. So like, and I worked in the same lab for all 4 years of undergrad. And within that lab, it was like all on the same overarching like topic or field, but just like 3 sub projects. One of which was more like I was working with a postdoc who like primarily designed the project, and I was like just mainly learning. And then the other 2 were more independent, and I feel really allowed me to grow as a scientist. So the way I approached my essay was just by like starting with like an introduction about like how I first got interested in research, because that's something I didn't hit on, like my origin story in like any of the other essays. Then I like gave like a brief like outline of like the research experiences I've had. And for each research experience or like sub project, I gave like a really layperson background in like a couple sentences. And I like gave them some of the key results that I got, but I mainly focused on like what I learned and how I grew, and like if I like did any well, actually, I think my presentations and like scholarships and stuff were covered in the activity section, so never mind. But primarily on like how it helped me grow and how that's prepared me for a PhD.
I feel like with this one, this is kind of your chance to, and I'll, qualify this statement in a second, but like we're all doing this because we love research. It's your chance to let it rip. Like all the stuff that you love doing, talk about it. And I think that Vaishnavi brought up a great point in terms of like, you don't want to do abstract, super high detail. You want to make it understandable, but show that you've mastered your material enough to explain it clearly. But one of the things that I did with this too, that I think was like super awesome, because I had 3 different experiences, was you have a chance to tell your story, to be able to share how your interests have developed over time, where you think you want to go, why you think you want to go there, but also talk about all the skills that you developed, all the things that you learned how to do, all the ways that you grew as an individual, how you faced failure, how you celebrated success, how you learned how to write a Goldwater fellowship. Like that's nuts. A lot of people don't do that. And so like you have this awesome skill set. So it's like, for me, it was this balance of talking about the science that I did, showing that I understood how to communicate it, showing that I understood how I grew through all these experiences, displaying the things that I was able to learn over time, and then project forward to what I wanted to potentially do with that, and how I felt I was ready based on these experiences and what I had been able to learn up to that point. Even though, you're looking through a window into what the PhD would be like, you wanted to really try to talk about why you feel like you're as ready as you can be at this point.
Yeah, I would say so my experience is that I worked in 3 different labs through like summers and school years in undergrad, and then I did 2 years of gap years at another institution doing research. So I had 4 separate labs that I worked in, and so I was kind of overwhelming in my essay because I was trying to hit every research experience, because if you have worked somewhere, you should write about it. It's like questionable if you choose not to like write about an experience that you had. So you want to include everywhere that you work. And so I was trying to figure out what that was, and I didn't have like a lot of words for each one. And so for me, like guidance that I got and sort of the tack that I took was to like present in like very basic terms, like through the whole thing, like what was the question that I was interested in? Like, do I know how to develop a hypothesis? Like, what did I try to do? Like, how did I approach answering that question? And then how did sort of like, what did I learn from it? Like Miguel was saying, and how did it inform what I wanted to do next? So for me, I was like kind of like field hopping, and I was like, first I'm doing this and then I'm doing that, because I literally was, every time I went somewhere, I was learning something about the kind of work and the kind of questions that I was interested in. And so I sort of used that as my transition as well between each of my sort of sections on each lab, because it also like is a little bit choppy and a bit of a more like formulaic feeling essay, just because you're like trying to like do this timeline of what you've done. So I tried to sort of like tell the story of why I went from this field to that field, or why I decided to shift from this kind of research to that kind of research. And I think additionally, like you don't have to like write out every single like technology that you learned how to use or every skill that you have, because in the end, like you can learn all of those things in grad school. You don't need to have done like every type of PCR on earth or something to like get into an MD-PhD. Like they don't really care. And so I think the bigger things to show are, one, like can you develop hypotheses and can you test them? And then also like, for example, like I had a summer project where I worked for 10 weeks and like literally nothing worked. Everything failed the whole summer and I had no data and I had nothing. And it was like super embarrassing, but I wrote about that in my essay. And I was like, look, I worked for 10 weeks and I got absolutely nothing out of it. And like, that's what science is sometimes. And like, I know that I can do that. And I know that I still want to come back next summer or like next fall and do research again, even though it was like the most demoralizing summer ever. So you can do things like that and you can talk about your successes and you can talk about your failures. And those can be important pieces of it too, without getting into the weeds on like the molecules and the genes and like your assays, because some people aren't going to get it and some people honestly just aren't going to care. So like let yourself shine through and like show how much you care about this work that you're doing and let your enthusiasm show. But I think it's like also really about those sort of like big picture things. And again, like, do you know what research is? How have you demonstrated that you're like ready to take on this path?
Yeah, I think I like.
Something.
I think oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, like, I also like feel that as like applicant, like we also like get straightforward to like talking about if we work but we not like productive enough or something like that. I think it's also like a good thing to like have the like objective way to see about research. Or sometimes we have like thing it happen, paper will happen, like, we need the permission for this thing or something like that, and it and showing like how we understand like research at like two sides. But I think it's really useful to like we're not like afraid to like mention about it in our writing. Yeah.
I was just gonna build off something Sarah was saying. I took like a slightly more similar path to Sarah. I'm currently at the NIH in my second gap year. I worked in 2 labs in my undergrad, and now I'm in my third lab at the NIH. And I did a lot of field hopping. And like for me, there's these great takeaways about like research things you learned and like goals you want to have in research fields. But like my research lab for my first experience, like my main takeaway had almost nothing to do with the research and all to do with like the lab environment and the mentoring. And like it worked out okay for me. Like I think it's totally okay that like you can say the research was cool and I got into it this way. And then I learned that if a research mentor can't do this for me, or they are only doing that, like there's this really important second piece that comes in, and being able to like say that you have the knowledge as you're going into a PhD program, that you know what works for you to find in a research mentor that's going to support you for 3, 4, 5 years is like also a super important thing that like I wouldn't shy away from touching on, even if it's not like hard research focused.
I'd like to build on what Ali was saying a moment and say that this is a good opportunity to subtly reinforce your entire narrative, that the research you have done, you can mention how it is one more time, presumably, how it has contributed to your motivations to do what you're trying to do currently. And that can include every bit of the good, every bit of the bad. I started as a chemistry major and ended up doing computational biology through 3 different research projects. And for me, it ended up working really nicely as a narrative, moving closer to biology, and then eventually into the MD-PhD path. And I think that can work really well. It's also, I will say, I've done a student interviewing a couple times for applicants at our program, and that is sometimes some of the things that students can be some of the weakest spots in students' verbal interviews is having no particular cohesion between any of their research experiences, or a lack of a narrative, or why did you go into this lab? Why did you choose that lab? No particular pattern or bigger picture from that. So if you can, you don't have to have planned to go into this one lab and fail at it, and that's why you're going to the next one. But if you can tie those experiences together into a narrative, that could be very helpful.
Another 2 things that might seem obvious. The first one is make sure you specify like what you did. Like in science, we use the royal we a lot, but for this essay, like use I for things that you did. You can use and like say like I said like, oh, my mentor performed the screen. There was no like ambiguity on like who did what. And that also importantly applies to like the process of like coming up with hypotheses or like reading the literature. Like don't just gloss over that, because those are really important skills for the PhD too, like maybe even more important than like pipetting. And the second thing is like I think like you can hear from all our panelists, and I'm sure like all of you are too, from like being Goldwater scholars for sure. Like let your passion show. Like let us have a window into your emotion when like things happened right or wrong in lab. And just like, because that will make it seem not dry, even though you might be talking a lot about like just science in this essay.
I just want to echo one of Vaishnavi's points about like your growth as a scientist in the thought process of science. I think that's one thing that I really liked about my own essay is I was in the same lab all 4 years. And so it was very sort of, I tried to make it obvious enough that I really didn't know what was going on when I joined the lab scientifically. I sort of was just doing things that were given to me. And then by the end of it, I was driving projects forward and I was thinking of the questions. And so sort of emphasizing that narrative and showcasing your growth as a sort of a thinker and not just a doer is also really important.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, especially about creating a narrative of your growth as a scientist. Like I did computational research all my undergrad, so I had to do a little more explaining on exactly what my projects entailed because it was a lot of modeling. But if you did like experimental work, it should be like easier to explain because I think in general everyone understands the basic concepts. But if you did do computational work, you have to do a little more groundwork explaining exactly what you were looking at and like maybe like your process of building models or algorithms that you wrote. And I tend to focus a lot on the troubleshooting aspect because I think that's the part that really shows your growth as a scientist. And I think that's the part that I like the most about my essay as well, just like showing like the problem that I was addressing, how I approached it, whether or not it worked, and how I reworked my approach and in the end, like if it worked or not. And results show like in either publications or posters.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I think William want to ask like if this essay like how much it like different or similar compared to the Goldwater research essay.
I feel like mine was a little less technical compared to the Goldwater essay. It was a lot more like big picture, question, hypothesis, and like results if you have any, like on like a like big picture scale, but definitely not into the nitty-gritties.
Yeah, and I talked a lot more about failure and all the things that went wrong in the significant research essay than definitely not mentioned a lot of that in the Goldwater essay.
Yeah, I think we can move to the next part. So I want to ask for student if any student willing to share the like their like essay or have any question about the specific essay. On if not, we can also read uh a red room. So and anyone who needs can come to have with his student.
Hi, I just wanted to thank all of you really quickly for doing this. I've definitely gained a lot of valuable insights. So quick question before we move on to the more individualized stuff. I'm wondering if we will have access in some form to the examples that we've went over previously, and if anyone had suggestions about how to find more examples to kind of draw from as the application process goes on.
Oh yeah, actually the essay is from a book like a guide that other MD-PhD African or they try they go there for to help with the student who applying. So I will send it to the everyone like later. Just in case that if you not put your because I only get your email like do the RSVPs like the format I sent out. So if you not like put your information in the list that just let me know and I will send the PDF to you. I think that all other students also want to like have more like in I think in that book they have like three example for each writing. Yeah, so yeah, and I think that all the students also want to like maybe like able to see more examples. So yeah, I think that he also want to like, yeah, it will be helpful if we can know that, oh, if there are any resources like we can see and read more to see how people like approach like the way they write about like it writing like differently. So yeah.
I think I forgot about this book, but I had come across it when I was applying, and I think it was some of the best content that I like got from any website. So, and I think they have like another person's essays at least that we didn't go over, so there should be more resources there.
Yeah, so I utilize this book quite a bit. And there's not only is there the three main people, but there's actually a whole other section of essays from other people in the back end. And then the book is like a couple hundred pages, and it literally breaks down the entire application piece by piece experiences, like for people that are just starting this journey, like what it means to be a physician scientist, what you should be thinking about, how you should be like building yourself as a person through the process. It's a really good book, and it's put together by like 3 different MD-PhD students and then one director as well. So it's very well written.
Yeah. Thank you, Tanvi, for removing the link for everyone.
You might have to access it through your institution. I don't know if it's technically open access or not. But I also read that book cover to cover before I applied. Thought it was super helpful.
I wish I'd known about that.
I think they published it during COVID, but yeah, I also read the book like multiple times while I was applying and also writing essays.
This is also just this is a general comment since we're sitting here. Is I think it's obviously a really good idea to have people read your essays. Like, don't be the only one who sees it. Also read it out loud. Reading out loud your own words is like a super good way to see if it sounds good to yourself, because you skip things in your brain. But have people read your essays. But like my suggestion on it, as I mentioned before, like I was a little happy passing around my essays to people who were really excited to like help me and read them. And it was confusing because I had different people with different perspectives giving me different advice, which felt a little yucky and like was confusing for me in terms of what was best for my application, and made me feel a little bit weird, like professionally, like asking for advice and then not taking it. But one, you don't have to take anybody's advice. And two is that like what I ended up doing that I think was beneficial is that I started asking people for specific advice. So like if I gave my essay to an MD, I would like ask them to read for a particular focus, or like, do you feel that I'm conveying, or like, what do you think I'm saying about like this question? Because you also can like lose your voice a lot, especially if you give it to somebody who's really like edit happy and is just going to like go through and like change little words. Like your voice will get lost very quickly. So my suggestion would be like, absolutely let other people see it. That's like an essential component, and give it to people you trust, but like trust your gut on it. And if you're going to ask for help, it can be, if you feel comfortable to do so with the person who's reading your essay, like ask them for specific types of help to make sure that you like preserve your voice. Because in the end, like that's, this entire thing is just like a very structured way to like present who you are. And so you don't want to lose that in the process. And you don't have to agree with what everybody says about your essay. You can like keep that little anecdote that they said is goofy. I did that and here I am. So
Yeah, another general tip, I tend to get like really mentally blocked when I put something down on paper and then I just like sit with that same paper and edit it. So it was like painful, but I think worth it to just like start with a blank page like multiple times during the process. So I could like really get like fresh ideas.
One other piece of advice that I got writing, which helped me a lot too, was like if there's certain experiences and stories, to like talk about them out loud and record yourself doing it and then write that down, because the way that you describe them, the excitement that you have in your voice, the words that you choose to use, like you put that onto a piece of paper, you're going to have to smooth it out because it's not going to work super well. But I think that like when I had to talk about something, what came out of me were the impactful pieces, the like really golden nuggets of those experiences. And then by just kind of like spitting that out and then, you know, trimming it and making it into essay form was super helpful.
like on the flip side of this too, like as we mentioned, this is like down the road for you all, but like you are going to get interviewed, and a lot of the questions that you're answering, whether explicitly or sort of implicitly in your essays, are the questions you're going to be asked on the interview trail. So I think like another good question when you're sort of like nearing a final form on your essays is like, when I read this essay, like this is sort of what the opposite of what Miguel's saying, but it's the same thing basically. It's like, does this read like what I would say if I was asked this question in an interview? And if what you're putting on paper and what you would think you would say in an interview aren't really lined up, one, that could be like apparent to your interviewer, and two, it maybe means that like one of those things is not quite as aligned with like where you're at as the other, and chances are it's probably the thing that you've written and edited like 500 times rather than the thing that you would say right out of your mouth. So I think that's also a good way. You could do it like talk out loud and then write it down, and then after you write and edit a bunch and let a bunch of people touch it, see if it still sounds like you, and see if it still like tells a story that you think that you would tell in your interview. And then again, like helps you when it comes time to prepare for your interviews to really be like ready to like verbally express yourself in sort of like a little bit higher pressure situation.
Oh, something I also I've like looked at a lot of people's essays like over the past couple of years to like pay it forward. And a common theme I see in like sciencey people writing YMD essays is that it ends up sounding like quite dry and like sciencey, and like it's all about problem solving and like finding the diagnosis and stuff, which is definitely a part of medicine. But I think like you want to dispel the like people from assuming that you're like robotic or just like in it for the wrong reasons. So I would like bring out the compassion and like personal qualities, which I'm sure like you all have. Just like, yeah, because I guess it takes a lot of like code switching to go from writing your significant research essay where you're like science, yay, back to like the medical essay where you're like talking about being like this caregiver. So that's like another tip.
Yeah, and like 30,000 foot view with that is don't be afraid to really like step into the emotion of the experiences that you've had and to write about them. Because if you write about those things that have deeply impacted you and you get asked about them, that comes across. And it's that difference between someone that really kind of seems robotic, talking off of bullet points or memorized script, to like someone who has had a deeply moving emotional experience. And that makes you so much more human and so much more real than someone who just has all of these crazy accolades and scores or whatever. And because like at the end of the day, the patients that we're going to see as physician scientists, even though like we're going to be running labs, a lot of the times like they don't care where we went, they don't care what score we got, they care how well we're able to communicate with them, meet them where they are, and empathize with what they're going through. And if you can show that in an interview through the stories and things that you've experienced, you're ready to be that person. You just need the standardized patients to help you understand how to say the right phrases and the framework to help you get there.
Yeah, and it's really nice to like able to hear that. Because like sometimes like I think that like we got like affair for like certain form advice that you need to do this, and need to be like in certain standard, something like that. And then we like sort of like we also need to remember like we also like show more about who we are as a human, like and we able to, and how we sympathize with other challenges, and also understand the not just like the positive side, but sometimes like both the good and the bad of both research and then for clinical aspect. So I think really grateful to mention, and it like encouragement from you guys. And I will create, I think, create breakout room just for students who want to like have more advice on their specific essay. So and if the student want to come to have more advice from other panelists, feel free to go to different breakout room too if they have like enough time. But